Mr. President, on another topic, it's no secret that the Federal Bureau of Prisons has been plagued by misconduct. One investigation after another has revealed a culture of abuse, mismanagement, corruption, torture, and death that reaches all the way to the top. One of the most troubling investigations was published last week by National Public Radio and the Marshall Project. The title of the report reads, and I quote, "How the newest federal prison became one of the deadliest." The facility in question I know well, United States Penitentiary Thomson. It's located in my home state of Illinois. In fact, it's a facility that I officially and originally encouraged the federal government to purchase in order to reduce overcrowding at high security prisons. The opening of U.S. Penitentiary Thomson was supposed to improve safety within the Bureau of Prisons, but the reality, sadly, has been the exact opposite. According to this report, 7 inmates at U.S. Penitentiary Thomson have died in just 2 years. 5 of them were reportedly murdered by other inmates. 2 died by suicide. And those deaths are just a snapshot of the grim reality at this facility, the deadly grim reality. The investigation paints a picture of rampant abuse by prison staff. This alleged abuse includes excessive use of 2 kinds of painful restraints, ambulatory restraints and 4-point restraints. The 4 refers to each of a person's limbs, which under this technique are chained to a concrete bed, rendering the individual immobile. This is in an American penitentiary. Bureau of Prison Protocol says that these restraints should be used sparingly and only to momentarily restrain an inmate who presents an active danger to themselves or others. According to this report, some guards at U.S. Penitentiary Thomson have apparently made a habit of regularly using these restraints on inmates, not momentarily, but regularly. In some cases, inmates have reportedly been left chained for hours and days. A lawyer who has spoken with U.S. Penitentiary Thomson inmates said, "The inmates are denied food, they are denied water. Many of them report being left in their own waste. It's really akin to a torture chamber." This is an American prison in my state. The use of restraints and shackles has become so common, inmates have coined a term to describe the scars that it leaves on their arms and legs. It's known as the Thomson tattoo. The report also alleges that the staff at U.S. Penitentiary Thomson have gained a reputation for stoking tensions between cellmates. Make no mistake, this is a special management unit. These are inmates who can be very dangerous, and I understand that. I understood it when the penitentiary was opened. One example that was highlighted in this report is indicative of the challenge. It was the murder of Matthew Phillips, a U.S. Penitentiary Thomson inmate who died in 2020. Mr. Phillips was a Jewish man with a visible Star of David tattoo. The corrections officers at U.S. Penitentiary Thomson reportedly locked Mr. Phillips in a recreation cage with 2 known white supremacists. These inmates beat Mr. Phillips until he was unconscious, and he died from his injuries 3 days later. Both men have since been indicted by the Justice Department on murder and hate crime charges. Following the publication of this shocking report, I joined Senator Duckworth, my colleague from Illinois, and Illinois Congresswoman Cheri Bustos, sending a letter to the Justice Department's Inspector General Michael Horowitz. In it, we urged him to launch a full-scale, immediate investigation into the failures at Thomson Prison. I spoke with General Horowitz yesterday. He confirmed that his office is investigating the deaths at Thomson, along with many other abuses in the Bureau of Prisons. But this report about U.S. Penitentiary Thomson is only the most recent look into the house of horrors that is the Bureau of Prisons, the Federal Bureau of Prisons. We already have ample evidence of a pattern of neglect and abuse that's been embedded in their bureaucracy. Consider, for instance, the Bureau's overuse of restricted housing, the practice of separating inmates from the general prison population, isolating them alone or with one other person for 24 hours at a time. The practice can cause severe mental anguish for inmates and can severely harm the prospects for ever re-entering society. Much like the use of four-point restraints, restricted housing should, at the Justice Department noted in 2016, be used rarely, applied fairly, subjected to reasonable constraints. That's the standard, the published standard of the Bureau of Prisons. During the Obama administration, I held 2 hearings which are still fresh in my mind. They were so gripping on the issue of solitary confinement. Following those hearings, the Justice Department took steps to reduce and reform the Bureau of Prisons' use of restricted housing. We started to make real progress. Unfortunately, the progress is erased during the Trump administration. And since the former president left office, the Biden Department of Justice has had plenty of time to change course and leadership, and I've urged them to do so. A year and a half into this administration, nearly 8% of BOP inmates are still being held in restricted housing. That's the same level it was under President Trump. That is just plain unacceptable. The continued overuse of restricted housing, the alleged abuses at Thomson, are among the many instances of misconduct and mismanagement that have occurred under the failed leadership of Bureau of Prisons Director Michael Carvajal. In light of those earlier reports detailing similar failures, I called for Mr. Carvajal's resignation last November. So it was welcome news. About 6 weeks after I asked for his resignation, he announced it. Director Carvajal said he was going to resign. But that was January. Now we're in June, and the Justice Department has shown little progress or urgency in naming Carvajal's replacement. As a result, he is still running and mismanaging the Bureau of Prisons. This recent investigation into Thomson makes it clear there are no excuses for further delay. So today, I'm calling on President Biden, Attorney General Garland, and Deputy Attorney General Monaco to do one of 2 things: either name a new reform-minded director to replace Carvajal immediately, or appoint an acting director until a permanent selection is made. This cannot wait. We need to act before another inmate dies in the custody and care of this federal government. In the coming weeks, the Senate Judiciary Committee, which I chair, will be holding a hearing on the Bureau of Prisons. We will examine these allegations of abuse at Thomson and other facilities. We need answers from the Biden administration on the failure to reduce the use of restricted housing, and we will discuss what BOP must do to address the staffing crisis that has contributed to this disastrous situation. The crisis demands the attention of the highest-ranking officials within the Department of Justice. It's been long overdue. It's time for us to have competent, principled leadership at the Bureau of Prisons. I'm not condemning every person that works at that agency for sure. I've met many of them and respect them. But those that are guilty of this misconduct need to be held accountable, and new leadership is imperative. It's been a long time since we've had that kind of competent, principled leadership. I believe that Attorney General Garland and Deputy Attorney General Monaco will choose the right leader to clear out the bureaucratic rot and improve these with significant reforms. But we need to act quickly. Lives are at stake. Mr. President, I yield the floor.